Snow White. Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom, there was a beautiful princess named Snow White. Her skin was as white as freshly fallen snow, her lips were as red as ripe cherries, and her hair was as dark as the deepest night. Snow White's beauty was the talk of the land, and everyone who saw her was captivated by her charm. However, Snow White's stepmother, the queen, is very vain. She owned a magical mirror that could speak and tell the truth. Every day, the queen would stand in front of the mirror and ask, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror would always reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." This made the queen very proud and happy. But one day, the mirror spoke differently. When the queen asked, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are beautiful, but Snow White is the fairest of them all." The queen was shocked and furious. She could not accept that anyone could be more beautiful than her. Consumed by envy and rage, the queen decided she had to get rid of Snow White. She called for her most trusted huntsman and gave him a dreadful task. She ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and kill her. To prove that he had completed the task, she demanded he bring back Snow White's heart. The huntsman, though loyal to the queen, could not bring himself to harm Snow White. He knew she was innocent and kind-hearted. As they ventured into the forest, he decided to set Snow White free. He told her about the queen's evil plan and urged her to flee and never return to the kingdom. Snow White was heartbroken and scared, but thanked the huntsman for his kindness. The huntsman then took a deer's heart, as proof of Snow White's death, and returned it to the queen. Snow White ran through the forest, her heart pounding with fear. The trees seemed to loom over her, and the shadows seemed to whisper threats. After hours of wandering, she stumbled upon a small, charming cottage. Exhausted and desperate, she knocked on the door. There was no answer. With no other option, she gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. The inside of the cottage was like a fairy tale. The furniture was small and cozy. There were 7 tiny chairs around a little table, 7 tiny beds lined up in a row, and 7 tiny plates on the table. Snow White, feeling very tired, decided to rest. She lay down on one of the small beds, and soon fell into a deep sleep. When the 7 dwarfs who lived in the cottage came home from their work in the mines, they were astonished to find Snow White asleep in their home. They had never seen anyone so beautiful. They were curious and concerned, so they woke her gently. Snow White told them her story, and they felt sorry for her. The dwarfs, who were kind-hearted and wise, decided to let her stay with them. They warned her to be careful, and not to let anyone in when they were not there. Snow White lived happily with the dwarfs. She took care of the cottage, cooked meals, and kept the place clean. In return, the dwarfs protected her and cherished her company. They all became very close friends. Back at the castle, the queen was still consumed by jealousy. She went to her magic mirror again and asked, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "Snow White, who lives with the 7 dwarfs, is the fairest of them all." The queen's fury knew no bounds. She was determined to end Snow White's life herself. The queen disguised herself as an old peddler woman and prepared a poisoned apple. She visited the dwarf's cottage, and when Snow White answered the door, the queen offered her the apple. The fruit looked so delicious and enticing that Snow White could not resist. She took a bite, and instantly, the poison worked its magic. Snow White collapsed, unconscious. The queen cackled with satisfaction, and disappeared, leaving Snow White lying on the floor. When the dwarfs returned home, they were devastated to find Snow White seemingly dead. They placed her in a beautiful glass coffin, and kept a vigil by her side, hoping that she would somehow wake up. Days turned into weeks, and the story of Snow White's plight spread far and wide. One day, a prince from a neighboring kingdom was riding through the forest. He had heard about Snow White's beauty, and wanted to see her for himself. When he arrived at the cottage and saw Snow White in the glass coffin, he was overcome with sorrow and awe. The prince bent over the coffin and gently kissed Snow White. To everyone's amazement, Snow White's eyes fluttered open. The kiss had broken the spell of the poisoned apple. Snow White sat up, and the dwarfs were overjoyed. The prince, seeing Snow White awake and well, asked her to return to his kingdom with him and become his queen. Snow White agreed, and they set off for the prince's castle. The wedding was a grand celebration, and everyone in the kingdom rejoiced. Snow White and the prince lived a long and happy life together. They ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and their subjects loved them dearly. As for the wicked queen, when she learned that Snow White was alive and married to the prince, she was consumed by her own rage and envy. She tried to escape, but her evil deeds caught up with her. In the end, she is defeated and disappears, never to trouble Snow White again. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, surrounded by their friends, including the 7 dwarfs, who continued to visit them and share in their joy.